There is one thing that Season 4 is not providing. I've seen a lot of talk about this on Twitter and some other places, and also Jesse Bear dropped us a super about it, saying, what meaningful reward track is available for people who don't do regular organized group content? They ignore a large player base. And man, that is so true. Now, there's one side of it here where it's like, it's an MMO. The best stuff should probably come from playing with other people. But an MMO can also just be having fun in a world where it feels like meaningful shit goes on.
Well, also, what is best? What does best mean?
Well,
because what's the point of Mythic Gear if you don't have a utility for it, if you're not going to do content that's hard? So why is that considered the best?
Well, I think that's why there's an unmet hunger here. So, because it wasn't a case of solo easy content, because that's what we think of when we think world content. A lot of these players might stop playing WoW and go play some DMC. Or Devil May Cry, or a Monster Hunter or something. They may actually enjoy hard content, but they just don't have like a static to do it with in an MMO. And I think for
that's exactly me, where I love that experience in single player stuff, but then when other people get into the mix, because I don't have a solid group of people that share my like very specific tastes and stuff like that. Yeah. So that becomes a little bit difficult. Whereas other people have that, and we're like, yeah, I've got 4 people, we do M+ all the time. So
it's almost like you would want. I mean, the Brawlers Guild is a good example of that.
Yeah.
The Mage Tower, I think that's also a good idea of that. So I think what they need is to take the concept of the Zereth Mortis gear and to go way further with it. Mm-hmm. I think we need areas that feel more like the Timeless Isle in terms of there being like a ladder to us, like very literally a hill to ascend with more dangerous mobs as you kind of go up that hill, and rewards that make sense. They need to have more challenging solo content for people to do, and I think some sort of gearing reward system for the world content that can really, in the same way that a Mythic Raider just walks around some world quests and feels like an unstoppable god, I think there should be a way for a world content player to feel like that. It doesn't have to be the fastest way in the world, but I think that should be there, and I think they should also have some really hard content that they could use that gear in, that is solo really hard content. There's examples of that have existed in the game, and generally when they've been put into the game, they've actually been received quite well.
Yeah, they've been received quite well. I'm not sure how well they've been actually done, but they've been received well.
Yeah, so I think that is one of the major areas of like just a big blind spot that WoW has. Now, when we think about this new expansion, we do know that there are various like perks and things that world like gear will have, similar to how the Zereth Mortis gear had a whole bunch of cool effects. But it's like, yeah, sure, you got Zereth Mortis gear with effects. When do you use that? I guess like you'll do a world quest a little bit faster, but a rare mob, you're usually doing that with a group of people. The world boss, that's getting utterly smacked.
Yeah, I mean, rares are designed in one of 2 ways. They have enough health and damage for you to solo, or they don't.
Yeah.
That's kind of interesting, but yeah.
So that's... what do you do with that, right? So I wonder what kind of things they could have there. I mean, the idea of just having a bunch of rare mobs, but maybe make them solo challenges. Maybe give them a few different levels of difficulty, right? You could tie this into like maybe a hunting board, or some sort of fantastical thing, and a player could ascend to the very top of that, get a really cool mount, have some badass gear, feel cool.
That's one thing they're very, very, very missing, I think, a lot of the time. And this is where stuff like Tomcats and this is where Warhead guides and stuff become really, really important for players. And that is, there's nothing tying together world content very much outside of currencies and reps. There's nothing like with the framework there. Like, you're kind of flying around waiting for shit to happen on your map, or for rare scanner to pop in Zereth Mortis. There's occasionally like call outs and stuff. But I think the thing they're missing is actually straight up like, hey, here's something happening in the world. Here's like, hey, these dudes keep showing up. We need you to kill them every time they show up or push them back. And that kind of framing to make it make sense and feel like content as opposed to feel like numbers. Because the minute a lot of that rares is like literally, I'll fly around circles because I need some rep or I need some progress on my bar that's being filled up. Let's just generally fight them back. But I think there needs to be more like specific kind of framing for it. Like you said, a hunting board. Hunting board would be so key for making it actually feel like
some way
something.
That, like, you know, you land where it is, you challenge the enemy in 1v1 combat, and there you go. Like, that's what it is. I just think things like that, you know. Rasmus also dropped us a super thank you. Said, since we are getting a new class, do you think... Hello, Siren.
I love living in a city. It's great. Live in cities. They're for humans.
Do you think they'll give us a new Mage Tower challenge to include Evoker, or will we have to wait longer for a new one? Yeah, unfortunately, you're not going to have a Mage Tower challenge for Evoker. But they did say to us, and hopefully this will happen, they did say to us that they like the Mage Tower, and they do have an intent to do something like that in the patch content of Dragonflight, and it may be themed around the deaths of Chromie and some plot threads from that. So I think there is the potential to get that. It just won't be there for launch, unfortunately. I found from RG Delta something I think SWOTOR does, actually. What about solo players wanting the full story? Well, that is something. Is there something to be said, like... A lot of people call LFR story mode, right? But LFR ends up being a more painful experience than normal quite often. So the idea that they could use some of their smart NPCs and basically have a solo version of a raid, where some NPCs do it for you, I'm sure that would be a challenge to code up. But other MMOs have actually done something that's kind of similar. And I have to wonder if that would end up being a better way to play the game for some people who, you know, the reason why they're doing LFR is because they don't have a raid. Just, I don't know, something in my head. And I guess maybe I'm thinking about it because you obviously look at Final Fantasy XIV and the duty support system where, you know, you can do dungeons and stuff like that with NPCs. Which, you know, is certainly an interesting thing. There's definitely stuff to be, to be said in its favor.